is now time for you to rejoin your new world and to serve its collective humanity. They can be a great people, Kal-El, they wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way. For this reason, above all, I have sent them you, my only son.
We, as a population on this planet, have been looking for a savior.
Is it really surprising that the most powerful man in the world should be a figure of controversy?
We're talking about a being whose very existence challenges our own sense of priority in the universe.
Must there be a Superman?
There is.
For years, Superman has been analogous with Jesus. There are striking similarities in their origins, their messages, and even their effects on real people. This is a new channel I've made as a partner to my main channel. I've named this channel the Pop Culture Christian, where I take a look at pop culture from a Christian lens or a Christian perspective. My name is Holden Hardman, and I am the Pop Culture Christian. Superman, like Christ, is a figure of hope. In the 2013 film Man of Steel, they strongly focus on this, with an emphasis that the very symbol Superman brandishes is not an S, but is in fact a literal symbol that means hope.
What's the S stand for?
It's not an S. On my world, it means hope.
Superman, like Christ, is a powerful force for justice in an unjust world. Superman carries the power and the ability to hold wrongdoers accountable for their actions, and we applaud him for it. For a time at least. Nearing the time of Jesus' crucifixion, he sends out a few of his disciples to go get a donkey so that Jesus can ride into Jerusalem as Passover approaches. As Jesus rides into the city on this donkey, all four Gospels record that the people gathered around were cheering for him. They were laying down palm branches on the streets and even their cloaks as a way to honor him. Fun fact, this is where Palm Sunday comes from. They were super stoked on Jesus. The people were loving him. This was only a few days before his crucifixion. The reason I bring this up is because Superman has experienced something similar. When Superman swoops down to save the day, the people cheer for him, but Superman is also a really easy scapegoat for problems. These issues are further explored in Zack Snyder's Superman universe once politics start getting involved. People blame Superman for the casualties during his battle with General Zod. Superman was blamed for the deaths in Africa in Batman v Superman. And most starkly, Superman neglected to hear a bomb at the Capitol in somebody's wheelchair, which resulted in the deaths of dozens, if not hundreds, of people. The movie goes on to ask the question, does the world need Superman? Just as Superman is cheered when he stops a nuclear bomb from going off, and then despised just as quickly, so too was Jesus praised when he entered the streets of Jerusalem, and those same people cheered to have him executed only a few days later. The very people that laid palm branches down on the streets as a way to honor Jesus voted to have a convicted murderer named Barabbas freed instead of him. Segueing to another superhero movie just very quickly, there's a line in the first Spider-Man movie that I think tackles this issue very, very appropriately. When the Green Goblin tries to convince Spider-Man to team up with him instead of battling against him, much like the temptation that Jesus faced for 40 days in the wilderness, but that's a video for another day, the Green Goblin says this:
"In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother?"
Christians often frequently, drastically, and too easily fail to represent Christ accurately. But even the most rigid atheists must ask themselves, does Jesus himself really deserve to be tortured and crucified? Were his crimes so severe that they warranted not only death, but humiliation? Tacitus, a non-biblical Roman historian who hated Christians, records that Jesus was in fact sentenced to death by Pontius Pilate. In the Babylonian Talmud, a non-biblical source, it recounts how Jesus led many Jews astray. The Sanhedrin wanted to have him stoned, and on the eve of Passover, Jesus was crucified. Again, this is a non-biblical source. The Babylonian Talmud has several lines that do in fact suggest a trial happened. This is, of course, in line with what we are told happens in the Gospels. Despite teaching arguably the greatest set of ethics ever told on the Sermon on the Mount, despite healing the blind, despite curing lepers, despite repairing the paralyzed, giving voice to the literal mute, exorcising demons out of both adults and children, bringing back people's loved ones from the dead. My man's controlling frickin' nature. The people still wanted to see him dead.
In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you.
Likewise, despite all the good that Superman does, the world still blames him for not doing more. But let's be clear here though, Superman is not Jesus. Jesus was perfect and sinless, and Superman, despite his extremely good nature, still falls short from time to time. And this is something that even Superman would admit to. The question remains though, does the world really need Superman? Does it really need Jesus, for that matter? My wife and I recently watched some of the original Superman movies, and we watched Superman Returns. And in that movie, Lois Lane writes an article entitled, "Why the World Doesn't Need Superman."
I read the article, Lois.
Yeah, so did a lot of people. Tomorrow night they're giving me the Pulitzer.
Why did you write it?
This is in part because of Lois's personal feelings of abandonment that she felt from Superman, but there was a real article written for the movie. In it, she lambasts Superman and blames him for all the problems in the world in his absence. Here are a few excerpts. People have always longed for God, messiahs and saviors to swoop down from the sky and deliver them from their troubles, but in the end, these saviors always leave, and we are faced with the same troubles that were here from the beginning. We wait for our Savior's return, and yet it will never happen, and we realize it was better had he never come at all. In her own respect, Lois has become an anti-theist. I try to separate atheists from anti-theists because I really don't think they belong on the same playing field. A sincere atheist, while maybe not convinced, is still open to kind of the discussion. An anti-theist truly just hates any concept of a higher power, any concept of a God, and actually thinks that the world is worse off for that, despite mountains of evidence to the contrary. It's also prevalent to remember that Superman did, in fact, return. They literally titled the movie after that fact. But Lois does, in a lot of ways, represent people that have been church hurt. That is to say, people who have been open to Jesus or even been outright Christians themselves, but then had an extremely negative or even abusive experience with a Christian and ended up not only rejecting Christ, but being hateful towards him. Lois certainly felt that way towards Superman. As Lois writes in her Pulitzer Prize-winning article, "Perhaps he really is a man of steel, cold, emotionless, and hardened by his own immortality. Would he say sorry?" In the article, Lois postulates that it's better to just fend for oneself than rely on a savior, speaking more from her personal hurt than from the evidence around her. When Superman does, in fact, return and speak to a jaded and distrusting Lois, she says the world doesn't need a savior.
The world doesn't need a savior. And neither do I.
Superman looks out for a moment, and he says this.
What do you hear?
Nothing.
I hear everything. You wrote that the world doesn't need a savior, but every day I hear people crying for one.
Superman is many things, but he's not omniscient. But he can hear cries for help from people all over the world. Lois cannot. As we might believe, because of our own self-righteousness, that the world would be better without God, God still hears everyone, hears all of our pain, hears all of our prayers. While Superman can enact justice on a case-by-case basis, God offers us all justice from the pain and evils inflicted on us in this life or the next. In our own culture, there's a very strong anti-religious, not even really anti-religious, more so anti-God, anti-Jesus rhetoric. And there are several reasons for this. A lot of it is because of God's fan base being really crummy. Some of it is because a lot of people have tried praying and they feel that their prayers go unanswered. And in many cases, people would prefer to just be their own gods. I don't want anyone telling me what I can or can't do. Culturally, we're very strongly moving to a more humanism and New Age religion. Do whatever just feels good. We're moving towards a religion of the self. You are the most important thing in the universe. If you want something, don't pray, manifest it. There is no objective truth. There is no objective reality. There is only your truth. And nothing is more important than your truth. But if we look at studies from across the country, we find out quite a few things about our culture. Consistently, rates of depression increase every year. especially among adolescents. Rates of reported anxiety increase every year, especially among teens. Marriage rates have dropped 60% in the last 50 years, despite the fact that drug use is on the rise, and I'm not talking about weed. Public concern is down, even in US states where drug overdose death rates have increased the most. Suicide rates in America increased 37% between 2000 and 2018, and then they peaked in 2021. From the years 2011 to 2020, sex trafficking saw an 84% increase.
You wrote that the world doesn't need a savior, but every day I hear people crying for one.
Superman is a fictional character. Jesus is a historical one, verified by biblical and non-biblical sources alike. His existence and his life have been verified by Christian and Christian haters throughout recorded history. The most important question you ought to ask yourself is Jesus really who he says that he is? Does the evidence, the historical, the gospel, the archaeological, really confirm the divinity of Jesus Christ? What we say culturally is, do whatever works for you. If you're happier as an atheist, man, be an atheist. If Christianity works for you, if you're happier as a Christian, man, then just be a Christian. Instead, what we ought to be concerned with is, what is reality? Is there a God, or is there not a God? If there isn't a God, what are the implications of that? What does that mean for me? Am I truly just a cosmic accident? Is there honestly no objective purpose to my life? But if there is a God, what are the implications for me? If my life truly does have purpose, well then what is that purpose? If there were, hypothetically, a God that really loved me so much, would I even accept that? One of those scenarios is the truth, and one of them isn't. And both situations will have a profound influence on your life if you stop long enough to process them. Superman isn't Jesus, but he is a Christ-like archetype. Superman offers us a man who does miracles, a man who can fly, a man with unimaginable strength, a man with heat vision, a man who might physically save us, but even Superman admits he can't save us all. Jesus offers us a teacher, a mentor, a father, and a friend, a God who will spiritually save us, a powerful ally, one who offers all of us everlasting life. And despite the world telling you that you don't need a savior, that you are perfect just the way you are, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, you're never too far away for Jesus to hear you and to save you. And that's it for this time. I am the Pop Culture Christian, and I'll catch you all next time. Up, up, and away!